this is Charlotte Reeves from Unleashed Education, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that is very important for pet photographers, and that is leash removal. Now, often when we're photographing our doggy friends, they do need to be on leash, whether for safety or handling reasons, and leash removal is probably the number one editing task that we need to do before sharing the images or before showing them to the client if you're in business. Now, you can do leash removal in both Lightroom and Photoshop. We're going to have a look and see which is best. I think many of you will already know the answer to this. So if we were to remove the leash from this image here, we would be using the spot removal tool here in Lightroom, and you can access that by clicking on this little icon up here or just pressing Q on the keyboard. Now it gives you a brush, and you can change the size and the feather of this brush, and you should always have it on heel. That tends to give the best result. So if we were to use that tool to remove the leash here, I would make it kind of around the same width as the leash itself, and I would also do it in sections. So I would just basically draw along from one end to the other, making sure I go a little bit outside the edge of the leash just to make sure I've got it all covered. Now, Lightroom will determine where it's going to sample from to blend the content in. It's chosen an area down here. You can then drag that around if you like, if you think it's going to create a better match elsewhere. So you do have that option. And then I would basically do this section here. Again, making sure I'm getting everything. It's going to choose a little bit up there. Now I'm just going to adjust this slightly to cover the leash better. Okay, that's not too bad. And then going for a smaller brush here, I'm just going to do this little bit here. And it's sampled from down here, which is actually a good option. Good work, Lightroom. So as you can see, that was fairly painless and fairly straightforward. It was quick. What it wasn't was a particularly wonderful job. As you'll see, you can see repeating patterns where Lightroom has used the content from the surrounding areas to place where the leash was. Plus, it doesn't do such a great job when it comes to going close to the dog's fur. So while it does work and while it is a solution, it's probably more of a quick and nasty solution than one that's going to be the best option for you. Now, if we were to do the same thing in Photoshop, so Photoshop is basically the gold standard when it comes to pixel level editing like this. There's a lot more tools available. You can really get in and fiddle around with the details to make sure they're absolutely perfect. Photoshop also has the power of content aware, which is a really, really great feature that's used across a number of different tools. So 90% of the time when the leash is against the background, this is the technique that I use to remove it. First of all, you need to make a selection of the entire leash. You have a few different options when it comes to selection tools. Most people think of a selection and they think of the lasso tool, which is good because you can kind of draw whatever shape you would like. You do, however, need to be fairly accurate with it. It's a lot easier if you're using a pen and a tablet rather than a mouse. I've found you can get a pretty accurate selection though with a mouse if you have a lot of practice. Now, another selection tool that I actually like better for leashes, because leashes often involve straight lines, is the polygonal lasso tool. So with this tool, you can actually click to create straight lined edges. So every time you want to make a point, you just need to click or tap with the pen and it will create a point. And then you go back to the start to complete the selection. So as you can see, we've selected most of the leash here. I'm actually going to go the whole hog and select this part as well. But the polygonal lasso tool probably isn't the best option for this little bit here. So while that's still selected, I'm actually going to switch back to the lasso tool. I'm going to press and hold Shift on the keyboard and actually draw a selection around the little clasp here to add that to what we already had selected. So now we have a selection of the entire leash here. I found that Photoshop generally works better with content aware when it's replacing all of the content of something that looks the same at once, rather than doing it in sections like we did in Lightroom. If you're on the background layer here, you can actually just press delete on the keyboard. It will bring up the fill dialog box here. If you're on another layer, say we wanted to duplicate that background layer, say we're working off the copy, you just need to press shift delete and it comes up with the same fill dialog box. Now you need to make sure content aware is selected, and also I like to keep color adaptation ticked here. So let's just press OK. And there we go. I'm just going to deselect. So as you can see, that's done a pretty seamless job. Generally content aware is pretty good in Photoshop. So there are a few little sections that we need to fix up here. It's duplicated this bit of hair, and there's maybe a bit of a repeating pattern up here. If you ever need to do extra cleanup work after using content aware fill on a selection, the best tools for that are generally the spot healing brush tool or the patch tool or the clone stamp tool. So the clone stamp tool is really excellent for blending content. So if I saw a bit of a straight line here and I want to blend it, say this tree looks a little bit funny here. So say I wanted to blend that tree down into this section here, I would hold Option, click to sample from up here, and then basically just paint down here to blend that. Generally I have this on a lower opacity, around sort of 40 to 50%. That gives a better result. If you want to have a higher opacity, that can sometimes work as well. Now, I've just noticed a little thing that we can get rid of with the patch tool here. There's a little section just here. I'm going to switch to the patch tool. And to get rid of this one, I'm just going to circle it and then click and drag from inside to outside to tell Photoshop where to sample it from, and then let go. And that's given a nice result there to get rid of that little section. And then the final tool I'll show you is the spot healing brush tool. Now this is really good for removing like bits of dust and dirt and things like that. And the beauty of it is you can actually draw with it as well. So if I wanted to say tidy this up by getting rid of this hair here, or maybe kind of tidying this up a little bit, you can do that with that tool quite nicely. There we go. Those are the tools I would use to do a pretty standard leash removal. So let's save that one and go and have a look at some of these other images and see if they're any different. So just to show you that same technique works across a range of different leash removal images, let's go through each of these in turn. So I'm going to open each of them in Photoshop, and let's use that exact same technique to get rid of the leashes in these shots here. For this one, I'm going for the polygonal lasso tool. We've actually got an arm to get rid of in this one as well. So I would draw around the arm first and then add to that selection. It's a very thin lead, this one, just by running along that lead down to here, and then zoom in and use the regular lasso tool to add to the selection here. And let's just press delete to bring up content aware fill. Okay, and deselect, and there we go. There's a tiny little patch in the sky where I mustn't have been very accurate with my selection. So I'm just going to select that with the patch tool. You can either use it as a patch tool if you'd like, or you can just do a content aware fill on the patch by pressing delete, content aware fill. Okay. It's done a fairly good job through here. I would probably just do a little bit of clone stamping on either side. I can see a really faint line where it's been removed. That's really not too bad. Okay, that's that one done. On to the next one. Okay, this one you would imagine it would be a little bit more difficult because the background is more complicated, but let's grab the polygonal lasso tool. We'll make a selection of the leash. Okay, let's see how this goes. Press delete, content aware fill, okay, and then deselect. If you look hard, you can kind of see where it was, but that's nothing that the clone stamp tool can't blend away, so you would never even guess. So it probably does need a little bit more blending because the background was more complicated in this one, but Didn't take long, seriously less than a minute. In the general scheme of things, not very long at all. All right, let's have a look at this third image here. Now this one's a little bit more complex in that the leash actually goes across the body of the dog. Now you'll notice in the other images that I always try and make sure that the owner or whoever is handling the dog is instructed to hold the leash up against the background so the leash doesn't go down to the ground and get in front of the dog or trail along the ground, because that makes it a lot more difficult to remove the leash. Leash placement is therefore very important to the success of leash removal. Basically, it makes your job easier when you're editing. So let's use the exact same technique for this. I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool again to select the leash. So you might have noticed here, this time I've actually selected where the collar has indented into the dog's fur, because I would like to remove all of that at once. So let's zoom out, delete, content aware fill, okay. And there we go. Even across that background where it was a little bit more complicated, you can kind of see, if you really look closely, nothing that can't be fixed with a little bit of clone stamp tool. Just reconstructing that edge there. And then a little bit of blending here in the fur, which is what you'd expect when you're making a pretty decent sort of change like that. So here we are back in Lightroom, and there you go, 4 leash removals done using essentially the same technique in Photoshop. I hope this has been really helpful for you. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, happy editing. I will catch you for the next editing toolbox video soon. Bye.